We will never change until we change our thinking. Now, once you get past the initial trauma of cutting yourself away from the important things, and you know, we were saying last night, all that is apparent is not real. There are apparent things, and then there are the real things. The reason our people love Christmas so much, and this is what I want to get to, this season, don't go in your family's house attacking everybody. See, don't make yourself such an unwelcome sight. Here he comes, preaching. We were having a good time. And here you come, you just heard something at a lecture, and now you want to go and destroy everybody's good time. No, it doesn't work like that. Work on yourself. And what you do, you're going over and visit the family. Holidays are a good time to see your family because they're all in one place. Usually they don't come together. So take advantage of the time to spend time with them. But if they offer you some food and you're on a fast, just say, no, thank you, I'm not hungry. What's wrong with saying it? Well, we're on Ramadan, and anybody that was right would also not eat. Only a slave, Uncle Tom Bojangles, buck this and would eat. Because I'm a black man, I'm a black woman. I don't eat no harm, and I don't drink no. And then everybody starts. And you look up, you're in an empty room. Saying, I know one thing, whatever I do in life, I will never become a Muslim. Them peoples is crazy. Them peoples is crazy. The boy had a good job at McDonald's. Now he out here selling papers. No, thank you. And as you practice this faith, Islam is a self-executing religion. And the fruits of it are inherent in it. So as you begin to look a different way, become more serene, look better because your finances will change if you truly practice the faith. Your financial condition will improve. And as that happens, your family will come and ask you. Now, if you say this coming week or next week or so, I no thank you, I don't want any, no thanks. Now if they probe you, why not? See, let them ask you. A person is much more willing to listen to the answer to a question they ask than to be beat up over something they don't want to know. Because you know, everybody got their uncle in the family. He's sitting over in the corner drinking Johnny Walker. What's happening, my man? Hey, have you read the latest Final Call? No, I don't want to read no Final Call. Now get out from the television, boy, you blocking the screen. But when they ask you, why aren't you eating? Because see, that's impressive. In a world of savagery, discipline is impressive. Okay? You want to have stature in the community? Be known as being disciplined. Black people love discipline because it is our nature to be that way, and we're so far from it, it's refreshing. So when they ask you, why aren't you eating, then you can explain softly. Well, you know, I am a member of the Nation of Islam, and each year in December, and then you begin to explain and tailor the explanation to the mindset of the individual you're speaking to. Now, you know your cousin who's the rapper has a different concept of things than your grandmother who's in the Church of God in Christ. See, the brother who's the rapper, he already thinks nothing of white people. So you can talk to him on a different level. But when you approach Aunt Susie, who is on the board of trustees of the Methodist Church and has been there for 40 years. No, you don't talk to her like that. You start talking to her about Jesus and how he is not being respected. And isn't it a shame, Grandma, that on the birthday of the Savior, people are out drinking and engaging, carousing and engaging in all kinds of sporting play. But I came over to see if you needed anything done. The nearer you get to the goal, the closer the goal gets to you. You know, when you approach something properly, at a certain point in your approach, that which you approach is going to get up and come towards you. This is why we say of Minister Farrakhan, he is what we call locked in. Meaning there's a certain point in a person's life when they have been so constant in their practice of their faith that you can say, I can trust anything that emanates from the mouth of that individual. People may say, well, oh, you trust this man. You don't know him. You're not with him 24 hours a day. You don't have to be. Because the behavior pattern that he has followed faithfully and loyally has earned our trust. Trust means I don't have to look at you 24 hours a day. It means that I have faith in your character. And this man, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, has demonstrated for over 30 years, over and over again, that he is a man that can be trusted with our lives and with our resources. Let me take you on a journey, briefly, that my husband, Brother Darius Muhammad, and myself took this summer to Egypt and then on to Mecca to perform the Umrah, or the circumambulation of the Kaaba, the spiritual center of the Islamic world. And I should say the dying Islamic world, when I speak of that one. That is terrible over there. When we went to Egypt, our plan was to travel there and spend some time in Cairo, then travel south to Aswan on the border of the Sudan. Aswan is the birthplace of the father of Master Farad Muhammad, Alfonso Muhammad. And we wanted to go there and experience the atmosphere there. And well, I'll talk about that another day. Utterly incredible. By the way, the people in Egypt look just like us. The people in this room. And particularly when you go and visit the antiquities, the tomb of Tutankhamun, the mask and the artifacts. And when you look at the statues of our people, they look just like you and I look now. And in fact, Sister Tainetta Muhammad has said that the 18th dynasty of the line of ruling classes of Egypt was so desirous of being present when the time of the resolution of the mystery of God came, that they projected their thought from that time into today, and that their thoughts are contained in us, and the flesh that is us actually is just serving as a home. So even though you think you might have been born 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years ago, you have been here actually for 78 trillion years, waiting for the flesh home to be ready for you so that you could be present when the mystery of God was revealed. So it didn't take 9 months to make you. It took 78 trillion years to produce you. This is why the Minister Farrakhan, is giving his lifeblood to save you. When you spend 2 hours cooking a meal, sister, and let's say we walk out the room and we get engaged and we smell something. Oh my God, my dinner is burning. We run into the kitchen with post haste to do what? Save that dinner. That dinner that has value to us because we put time into his preparation. So how do you think God feels about what it took 78 trillion years for him to put together? He's given everything he's got to save us. But when we were there in Egypt, before we left, just before we left, Minister Farrakhan said to us, I would be happy if you would go into Mecca and perform your Umrah while you were there. So immediately we made effort to get the necessary visa to go into Saudi Arabia, because you can't go into Mecca unless you are a Muslim. They will not allow you in unless you are a Muslim. And we were unable, or the persons in the national office that were to handle that did not do that. So we left the country with a visa to go to Egypt, but no visa to go to Saudi Arabia. So we had to do it when we got to Cairo. We went to the Saudi Arabian embassy in Cairo. And we had with us from the leader on his letterhead a letter from Minister Farrakhan stating to the royal embassy that we are in fact Muslims. Well, brothers and sisters, I learned something very profound in that effort to get that visa about the man and the woman, the black man and the black woman, and what is going to happen to us when the day comes that we must stand up as one to go to war with the enemies of our people, the enemies of Islam, the enemies of our God. It is going to be absolutely necessary that we stand together, solid as a wall. There can be no disharmony in the black community between the male and female, because this dissipates the power of the man to go out and take back what is his. Now, when we went into the Saudi embassy the first day and presented our credentials, we ran into so-called Muslims who were smoking cigarettes, women over there who had on more makeup than Madonna. You know how you see them on television and they have the black shroud covering themselves from head to toe? When you actually get up on them, that material is sheer. It's opaque, but you can see through it, almost like lingerie material. And directly underneath it are whatever you want to name from Western style. Everything from skin-tight jeans to red mini dresses. These are the Muslim women of the Middle East that I'm describing to you. And I say this to anybody that's thinking in their mind, Minister Farrakhan is not an Orthodox Muslim. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad is not an Orthodox Muslim. No, these are the Orthodox Muslims right here in North America. That over there is completely overcome by the white Western world, completely. So much so that they were afraid to grant us entry into Saudi Arabia. And they are extremely racist. Extremely racist. Racist as well as sexist. But when we presented ourselves at the Saudi embassy, the first question that my husband was asked by a cigarette-smoking Muslim, puffing smoke in our faces as he questioned us as to our faith. And he asked my husband, how long have you been a Muslim? Because they tend to view us as converts, us the black man and woman. My husband said, I was born a Muslim. And the man said, all praise be to What about your father? He was a Muslim too. Because we are taught we are Muslim whether we know it or not. We're not converts. And don't ever let anybody refer to you as being converted. This faith belongs to you. But the man's reaction was such, he was so shocked because he's used to certain so-called American Muslims coming there and saying, well, I became a Muslim on such and such a day. Such a happy Jack Negro, so happy to pretend they're being an Arab, that they come over there giving a date of conversion that he was not prepared for that. So he says, oh, you made it past me. Go on to the next step. Now, as I'm talking, keep in mind study guide number 3, overcoming difficulty. Because I'm trying to prepare you for something, because all of you are going to go over there. You're going. All of you. At some point or another, you will go over there. Because Master Farrakhan Muhammad wants you to go. Now, we went upstairs to the consulate's office, and at that time, we were confronted by a Saudi who was dark-skinned just like us, but spoke no English, and was using an Egyptian interpreter. We spoke no Arabic, or very little. We just know some of the basic words that we've learned, and some very primitive phrases. But through the Egyptian interpreter, the Arab told us that they did not accept Minister Farrakhan's letter. My husband at that point did something that even came as a surprise to me. Not because I was unaware of his level of intelligence, but what I was unaware of was the deep grasp of the Holy Quran and the ability to maneuver and use it in a war of words. The anger was indescribable when they told us our leader's letter was insufficient. It was not from a head of state, but from a private individual. Well, I could feel the anger swelling up in my whole being. And I looked down because the anger started at the tip of my toes, like a backdraft, a fire, and I let it rush up, and I knew when my head came up, I was going to open up. But by the time my head came up, my husband was already out there. And he was slicing heads, not with the physical sword, but with the sword of the word of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And it was so powerful. It was so powerful that you had Arabs sitting around the room. Everybody's puffing and smoking. The whole room came to a standstill as they listened to this dispute. And you could hear them murmuring in Arabic to one another. And my husband said to them, the Holy Quran teaches that you do not hinder the way of the believer from the mosque. He said, and if you stop us from going into Mecca, Allah will burn down your Kaaba and the Muslim world with it. All praise be to Allah. And I can't get into the entire dialogue at this moment because there's not time. Because we spent 2 days at war with these people. And I'm telling you, you will be challenged, beloved, at a time in your life on what you believe. And at the time it happens, you will be not the dominant presence. You might be the only believer in the room. It's easy to sit in here and say we all believe. But when you go halfway around the world, nobody in the place knew us. We didn't have a lawyer there. They could have arrested us because we were so forceful We refused to back down. And my husband said to the man, says, well, how do I know you're a Muslim? My husband said, because I've traveled halfway around the world to come here. He said, don't play with me. He said, if you were a believer, you could perceive that I'm a believer. Am I a Muslim? How do I know you're a Muslim? He said, you're looking at me. That's how you know I'm a Muslim. So they were so distressed, they told us to go away and come back tomorrow. You know, and the first thing I thought of that movie, The Wizard of Oz, when they told Dorothy and the Scarecrow and them, go away and come back tomorrow. Because that's just about what that is over there. Oz. So that day, that first day, we were dressed in our Muslim garb, but I had on a draped scarf and a 19, and he had on his suit and his bow tie. So we said, okay, you want to go to war? Let's go to war. So we went back to the hotel and we had a war meeting. Just the two of us. We don't know anybody in Cairo. We walking around in Cairo. We from Chicago. We with Farrakhan. It didn't occur to us till much later that we could have been jailed or killed. But at the time, we weren't thinking like that. The next morning, we had a scheduled visit to the pyramids at 6 a.m. And we kept that appointment, rode the camels out to the pyramids in the dawn. That's a beautiful experience to see what your fathers built. And the devil's out there staring at it. How'd they do it? They can't figure it out. But my husband said, put on your white uniform. And he put on his white uniform with the star and crescent on the shoulders and on the forehead on his fez. And I wore my white headpiece and my white garment, and we returned to the embassy. This time, the moment we got out of the car, we had a driver there by the name of Gamil, who was a very beautiful Egyptian brother. But when he pulled up and let us out the car, outside of the embassy is always like a carnival. People waving passports, speaking 1,000 languages, trying to get in. When we went back the next day and we got out the car, everything froze in suspension at the sight of us. We went in, and this time we encountered no difficulty getting through the gate, went right back to where we left off the day before. And here's the point I want to make. Because you might ask, well, while your husband was doing all this talking, since you're supposed to be a preacher and a lawyer and all this, what were you doing? Weren't you helping him? Yes, I was. And I never opened my mouth. The way all praises be to Allah. The way that I made sure that he won, I was the outcome determinative factor. Because as the dispute occurred verbally, I, the subconscious or female side of my husband, presented the image of what he was saying. I was the witness of the truth that we are in fact Muslim. Because how do you know the level of a development of any man? By looking at his woman. And all praises be to Allah. And I stood there covered in white in a country where all the Muslim women wear black. They are not permitted to wear white. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan have dressed the MGT in that which the Muslim world does not permit its women to wear. So they were so distressed and psychologically imbalanced by my appearance that they couldn't handle looking at me and talking to him at the same time. And so together we defeated them. We defeated them. They had no choice but to issue those visas. And my point is this: we must be in harmony. Misinterpretation of fact can produce very negative results. And as I indicated earlier, racism is produced by misinterpretation. Now, returning briefly to the O.J. Simpson trial, and then I will have my seat, and I think that we will open the floor to question and answer. Now, I am an attorney, and I served as a prosecutor in the city of New York. I have been responsible for sending people to prison for breaking the law. And I preface my comments on the O.J. Simpson case with that. But it was a manifestation of pre-existing perceptions or racism that caused white America to have such a vehement response to the acquittal. Now, O.J. Simpson, and we cannot discuss whether or not he did it. I was not there. All right. So I cannot and would not attempt to answer that question. What concerns me and what caused distress to me during that case and in the aftermath of it was the fact that a jury sat for 9 months and listened to evidence. Now, the law says that where there is a reasonable doubt as to any material fact, then you are not only given a right, but you have a duty to find in favor of the defendant when that happened, because it was not the outcome that Caucasian people wanted. They were ready to throw away the law and say that the law doesn't make any difference. Now we are calling the jury names, perceptions. As a black woman, I don't perceive the jury as not giving due deliberation. When you sit for 9 months and hear evidence, it is only natural, unless something is wrong with you, that you are going to begin to form an opinion. That's right. Secondly, reasonable doubt was raised very early in the trial. Everyone wanted to focus on the so-called race card. However, everyone wanted to overlook the presentation that was made by Dr. Henry Lee, the forensic expert who raised reasonable doubt when he challenged the integrity of the evidence. Why is there this presumption that black people don't understand scientific presentation? Where did that come from? We can also look at that in the reverse and say how silly and ignorant it is to say that a person who committed such a violent murder, where 2 people were brutally murdered, cut, stabbed, the jugular vein was pierced, blood sprayed everywhere, and you're discussing minute drops of blood as evidence. All right. Why is it that Johnny Cochran is called names by Marcia Clark in her autobiography? Johnny Cochran is accused by other members of the legal profession, Caucasian members, of making money off of the case, when Marcia Clark is now a multi-millionaire from this case. Chris Darden is a multi-millionaire. These were government workers who just happened to be in the, quote, right place at the right time. How many attorneys were made into talk show hosts off of this case? And yet the one black man who stood out as the centerpiece of the case is condemned and referred to by such names as Calhoun and called a slickster and a shyster, when he did nothing more than give a brilliant representation of his client. I am currently engaged in an appeal on a libel suit that was filed by Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam against the New York Post. In 1994, that paper issued a headline that said, "Malcolm X widow pins murder on Farrakhan," in big, bold letters. Most of you are familiar with the New York Post. You know that it's a tabloid. A tabloid that is now hiding under the protective embrace of the First Amendment, which was never designed to protect this type of libel. But this was a divisive measure using the late Dr. Betty Shabazz, a member of our community, the widow of one of our slain leaders. How did the U.S. government feel about Malcolm X? And yet there is a division in the black community because Minister Louis Farrakhan, there are rumors that he was responsible for the assassination. And though most of us know that that is absurd, because it is constantly fed in the white press, credibility is given to it. So after listening to this for 10 years, we said we cannot allow this any longer, and we brought the lawsuit. And though we have proven that the statement was made, we cannot get a trial of this case. Why? Because a judge has said, yes, you have shown that the statement was made. Yes, it was not true. It is not true that he is the murderer of Malcolm X, and it's not true that the widow of Malcolm X said that he murdered her husband. However, because he is a public figure, he must prove actual malice. He must prove that the defendant intended to print this story, that they knew when they printed it that it was unlikely to be true. We have proof of that, volumes of proof that the writer knew that what he was writing was presented in a way that was false. However, the judge decided you can't prove that to a jury. Well, I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that that is a question for the finder of fact. That's the question for a jury to decide. That is not a question of law, whether or not the New York Post did this intentionally, whether or not Jack Newfield, who wrote the story and claimed to have had access to FBI files, did in fact have that access. He claimed to have interviewed a person by the name of Charles 37X Kenyatta, who in turn claimed that a former member of the Nation of Islam said Minister Farrakhan was personally involved. Why can't we interview this person and question that person? And so this is a matter of the judge's perception, you see, being irreconcilable with our perception of the facts. And this is why we are entitled to have a jury of our peers to hear this case. The John Benet Ramsey murder is on the other side of the spectrum. And I want to use that as I take my seat as an illustration of superiority complexes. Now, I do not know, again, I was not there, but I know that this was a horrific crime. And I know that all of us are sitting here tonight and a 6-year-old is lying in her grave who died a torturous death. Now, we know one thing. We know she died in her own house. We know that there was snow on the ground, and there were no footprints in the snow, indicating that that anyone came in or out of the house. We know that this was Boulder, Colorado, where everyone knows everyone else.
That's right. That's right.
And yet, I am not talking about a conviction. I am asking, where is the arrest? There is not sufficient evidence to arrest, they claim. And yet, when O.J. got off the plane, returned from New Jersey on his own, he didn't have to come back. He was not under any obligation to return to Los Angeles, but he flew in on his own and he was immediately handcuffed. Now I ask you, does this represent an abyss between the treatment of one and the treatment of the other? The Ramseys have left Boulder. They just moved to Atlanta, where I live. When my husband and I took out our mortgage, when we moved from Chicago, Illinois, to Atlanta, Georgia, my husband's standing here, he will bear me witness, we were asked by the mortgage company to write a statement explaining why we were moving from Chicago to Atlanta, Georgia. Now the press is here. I want you to ask whether or not the Ramseys had to put on their application, because I have a good idea why they're moving from Boulder, Colorado to Atlanta, Georgia. But I say to all of us that if we would just submit to the Creator and begin to look at everyone else through His view, rise above emotion into the thinking of God. Don't look at people through our eyes. Look at people through God's eyes, because no matter what we think of that person, He had a reason for allowing that person to come through the torturous journey from the sperm into life. And so may Allah bless all of us with the light of understanding as I greet you in peace. Assalamu alaikum.
My question is for both of the panelists. I want to know, do you really think, since we've been talking about white supremacy all week, is it possible for people of color all throughout the world to actually live in actual peace as long as the white man remains on the earth?
Who would you like to answer that question? Any takers? Be my guest.
As I attempted to address in my remarks, what we are dealing with is a state of mind. This is what has to be destroyed, is a state of mind. And superiority as well as inferiority are both states of mind that are not aligned or in harmony with the will of God. You and I are just as much in error when we submit ourselves to another as the person who is seeking to force us to submit. Do you understand? It is wrong in the sight of God to worship any other than Him. And so it is always going to result in wars and conflict as long as we are out of balance. Now, as long as we use the term race, and I take these words from Minister Farrakhan, a race is something that has a beginning and an ending. It is finite. And as long as the Caucasian people insist on categorizing everyone, including themselves, into races, then they're actually bringing about their own demise. Because if you had a definite beginning, you have a definite ending. If you want to be on this earth eternally, the only way to do that is to align yourself mentally and spiritually with the will of the Creator, because flesh is nothing more than the home for the spirit. And the flesh will ultimately leave. It will not be able to sustain the spirit except for a finite period of time. And even though melanin-dominated people have the ability to achieve more longevity, we too will ultimately leave the planet Earth. And so the goal is not so much to dominate the Earth, and I think that's the problem now, is who is going to have charge over what territory. There is a false conception out now that has been put out by the Caucasian people that the Earth is overpopulated. The Earth is not overpopulated. The Earth has sufficient space. I think the study was, upward of 40 billion people. But when you have one person who owns 1 million acres of land and just uses them for recreation, then you have a population problem. And so again, what we are dealing with is not the absence of sufficient resources, but the improper distribution of wealth. And as long as that exists, there will not be peace, there will always be war.
No, I think she said it all. My name is Ava Muhammad, and I have 3 questions. The first 2 questions are for Sister Ava Muhammad, and the second question is for Sister Rebecca. And keeping the focus of white supremacy, could you comment on the prevailing exploitation of black women in the area of entertainment? And also, Sister Ava, could you explain the phrase, "A nation can rise no higher than its woman"? And then for Sister Rebecca, could you comment on the celebration of the holiday Thanksgiving?
Holiday, what I can hear. Thanksgiving. All right.
On the question of the exploitation of black women in entertainment, I will tie that into the second question, a nation can rise no higher than its woman. I recently came across a term used in psychology called learned helplessness. And the psychologist who used it said that this is not an inherited trait, this is an acquired trait where one thinks that one has no control over his or her own circumstances, but is totally dependent upon some external force. One of the residual effects of disobedience to God's will has been sexism. And in the name of religion and in the name of politics, there have been doctrines that have upheld this idea that the only function of the female is the sexual satisfaction of males and to be the carrier of physical life. But we know, particularly the black woman, through our experience and our sojourn here in America and having carried the black nation through 430 years of suffering, we know that not only is the female the carrier of physical life, but she is the carrier of the vision. That there is no dream that can be fulfilled unless there is a woman to help man attain that dream. And you cannot name any man, black or white, of stature who does not name a female in his life that had some impact, because it is the woman who nurtures and gives the man a place for his aspirations to come into being. So, if the female is going to be used on television as a, quote, video babe, and her only function is to shake her booty and to show her breast and to lay down, then what does this leave for the nation? Since this woman who is laying naked in the bed and shaking her booty is going to be someone's mother.
And since men form their views of women primarily based on their experience with their own mother, then until the black woman, instead of waiting for someone to come and uplift us, until we uplift ourselves and become self-respecting, we will not be respected. Because a nation can rise no higher than its woman. Why? Women carry life. Women give birth to life. Women are the first teachers. And you will notice that there's no nation on this planet that is respected that has indecent women. And so, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad also says, where there are no decent women, there are no decent men. I just read before I came here in a magazine in the hotel talking about the increase in adultery. That one reason there is such a large increase in adultery is because there are so many women who are willing to engage in illicit affairs with married men. And so if women were to respect one another and to say to a man, no, I will not engage in a relationship with you because you are married and I respect that woman whether I know her or not. And if doors are shut, then there will be nowhere for him to go but home. And I close with this. We make fun of our grandmothers and their high neck blouses and their big high button shoes. But one thing that grandmother had, she had a husband who went out and worked that lower 40, and at night he came home to her. You have to give a man something to honor, and then he will rise to the occasion. I would repeat and reiterate that one thing that is missing among women of color is a bonding of the sisterhood. Because before we can talk about race relations, as Sister Yahola's talking about, we have to deal with family. Because without family, there's no community. And without community, there can be no nation. Because that's where power develops, is right in the community. Now we know that in the so-called ghetto, in America, when we walk through the streets, there is a certain depressed, gloomy atmosphere. And because of these feelings of inferiority that are bred into us as children, we have this idea that the solution to that problem is to escape and to leave the neighborhood or the community and to move among white people. It is not so much that we are so anxious to leave our own people and live among white people, but it is natural to want a nice home. But what escapes us is the idea that homes are nothing but brick and mortar and streets are nothing but concrete. And there's no reason in the world other than our own inferiority that is causing now the black community to look like it does and to feel the way it feels. There's no reason we can't wake up in the morning and have nice coffee shops. We shouldn't have to go miles away to go to a Starbucks as though that's the apex of coffee. You can open up a coffee shop and have muffins and baked goods. We can get a newspaper. We can have smooth sidewalks, but we have to do this ourselves. And this begins with the female who teaches the children, because our world is nothing more than what our thoughts create. And our community is a manifestation on the physical plane of how we see ourselves on the mental plane. And I invite you to get my book this evening, The Force and Power of Being. It addresses those issues. Thank you for that question, sister.
Very good. Let me add to that in full association with...
So here we stand, but let's go up to 1972. Because also in Baltimore, Brother Carlos had a recording
that was absolutely amazing. April 16th, 1972, Harlem, New York, the legendary Temple number 7. I won't go deep into it because it was a meeting of the registered Muslims. The minister was a 38-year-old Louis Farrakhan. He had just returned from Chicago, being with the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. He was so full of excitement, it came out of the CD. The believers were so excited, and he shared with them point by point all that had been said. Well, what had happened 2 days earlier was the infamous encounter with the New York Police Department. And after that incident, Minister Farrakhan declared he wanted all white police out of Harlem. Now, one writer described April the 14th, 1972 as, I quote, the darkest day in the history of the NYPD. Darkest day. It was one of the brightest days in our history because they came in our house with guns. And as the minister said, no regard for our life, for our babies. These are the descendants of the same people that lynched and dismembered that brother and sister. Understand who we are dealing with. Recently in Texas, because I'm telling you this because a movie is about to come out, recounting or allegedly, supposedly recounting these events. You notice that every time the minister starts to flex his muscle to take us to the next level, they get busy. So you need to know before it even hits the screen that you're going to get a distorted, damaged perception of reality. Understand that whatever happened to those police in that mosque, they were in our house. They were in the house of God. They came in there with guns. They brought the guns. We didn't have any guns. I want you to understand that because of what's coming down the pipe. Recently in Texas, two Latin brothers, very dark-skinned Latino brothers, went in, out of order, burglarized somebody's house. The white man that lived next door, this was not his home, he was the next door neighbor. He heard the noise, he saw them, he called 911. The police dispatcher instructed him, do not move, don't come out of your house. We're on the way. He told the dispatcher, I'm going to go out there and kill them. They were fleeing the scene. They were running. He shot them in the back, killed them. But that's okay. That's okay. The word protest, by definition, includes powerlessness. When we protest because we don't have any power. Allah always compensates in nature for any weakness that we have. So when we're not in control of our own destiny, then he balances that with the ability to cry out against it until that time comes when we have control. Now that time has come, so we're at the end of protest. In this situation with the then called Temple number 7 in New York under Minister Farrakhan's leadership, and you've got to understand what type of man this is and always has been. At that time, the police came to the realization
that this is real Islam. The Islam taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, it deals with prevailing conditions. It is natural because it is the nature of God. So in Islam, you respond to any situation with that which comes naturally. It is not natural when somebody shoots your brother in the head 41 times to write a letter. You understand what I'm saying? So when they came up in mosque number 7, they didn't get a letter. They got dealt with. And let me tell you, Minister Farrakhan referred to it. He said the FOI entertained the police. And he said the brothers are very good at entertaining. You come to visit our house, we're going to entertain you. All praise is due to Allah for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan. He said the faculty, the teachers of the University of Islam were out there tangling. Our babies were in school. And I'm telling you this because of what's coming. And the minister said, when he said the other week, back against the wall. That's what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad told him. Get your back against the wall, prepare to fight, do battle. He told the believers that day from the messenger, Allah hates a coward. Now, beloved, have you noticed that the racist white media has very little to say about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad? And they don't say nothing about Master Farrakhan Muhammad. And since our minister withstood their relentless attacks, Brother Arif Muhammad and many of us, we were on these legal teams. I mean, we were fighting tooth and nail throughout the 80s and 90s, the most relentless propaganda campaign ever waged against a single man in the history of the United States of America. And he was unmoved. He was unmoved. I remember going to, Barack Obama won this Iowa caucus, and we need to pray for him because, they're meeting on him now before he, God forbid, gets a nomination. They get their Secret Service around him. It's going to just take it up on another level. But they were so shocked that all these white people under 30 voted for Barack, but it doesn't shock us. These white children came up under the voice of Minister Louis Farrakhan. I'm serious about that. They have a whole nother perception of a black man. See, it was the minister all the way back at the final call, calling this beast to task about the absence of any black anchors and news people. All of a sudden, the television filled with black faces. These are children that grew up thinking Bill Cosby was their daddy. So see, if you're not Allah and you try to manipulate a situation, you're going to be the loser when you're not right in your motive. Now, the reason they feared and fear the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is because he ignored them completely. He was and is the first direct descendant of slaves to do that. You got to understand how big that is. His mission, this is how you know he met with God.
Because I would imagine, it's almost unimaginable to me what that was like. But one thing I could imagine, after you met with God, what do you care about everybody else's opinion? What could you possibly be concerned about? So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, it is immaterial to me whether you follow me or not. Minister Farrakhan said, if you stop thinking about white people, they will cease to exist. And that means no impact on your and my reality. You understand? They tried 1,000 ways to derail that Million Man March. The minister, what scared them most was the fact that he did not call and ask their opinion. That's why I opened up saying a living example of a free black man, because you don't have too many of those. In fact, you don't have none like him. None. Who wakes up in the morning with no regard for any but Allah and his messenger in dictating his agenda. See, he didn't consider or consult them, but he called 1 million brothers to come to their capital and meet me at his house. And they scattered like roaches, like Al Pacino said, like a cockroach. You see, beloved, no one can live outside of the mind of God. And the black man is the God of the universe. So if you don't live in his mind, you don't live anywhere. So if he doesn't think about you, you don't exist. So we uphold the world of the descendants of our slave masters because we keep them in the forefront of our mind and don't act in our own self-interest. That's why the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, and Minister Farrakhan teaches, self first, then others. So we cannot continue to sit under Minister Farrakhan's voice week in, week out. And I don't mean just registered Muslims. I'm talking about the whole black nation, because he has hit everybody. He has been around and around and around in the millions of miles, millions of words. And we cannot continue. That's right. That's right. Teach, minister. And then go out Monday and just go on back to this plantation and give all of our creative energy and mind to upholding the world of our enemy. Now, am I saying go out tomorrow and quit your job? Not tomorrow, maybe the next day. But what I'm saying, beloved, is we've got to start thinking nation. We have to think like nation builders. And you can't build a nation after work. He walked away from a lucrative career in the performing arts. Minister Farrakhan, Mother Khadijah, their children, grandchildren could live a lavish life. And he wasn't some little small-time Rudy Boot entertainer. He was drawing fans. You know he was, because look what he does talking. He walked away from that for our freedom. We can't think our way out of some little job. We've got to start pooling our resources, not only our money, but our mind and our heart towards self-interest. This is a racist, unrepentant America. They have denied us our history, denied us our identity, denied us a proper education. In the public school system, it's actually better, sisters, and this is why we got to start living in proximity to one another. You understand? Forming clusters. Because we can homeschool and support one another, help one another. We've got to stop allowing our children to go away from us to hear their story from a wicked enemy. We go to these schools and it prevents us from acquiring a thorough knowledge of self. We're disconnected from our true 76 trillion year history. Instead, look at this. The children of the slave masters and the children of the slaves hold a toxic and false belief that our roots go back to our relationship with them. A new grafted people that we were forced to serve because the King James Bible tells us it's the nature of things. So we're relegated to this title of first. Very dangerous. First black mayor, first black CEO, first black Secretary of State, first black Oscar winner, first black quarterback, first black astronaut, first black news anchor, first black airline pilot, first black governor, first black to win the US Open, blah, blah, blah. First black viable candidate for the US presidency. Now you say, well, what's wrong with it? I'm going to tell you what's wrong with it. Because the white child looks at his parents and says, they've been here all this time and they're just now achieving this. And the black child looks at us and says, only one of us has been able to attain this. Well, no wonder we're their servants. Our children need our true history. We're not only the first, we're not only the first on earth, we're the maker and owner of the earth. And all praise is due to Allah. For the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Louis Farrakhan. I want us to look at how our survival skills are killing us. I'll say that again. Our survival skills are killing us. That sounds contradictory, but let's look at it. Descendants of the tribe of Shabazz, we're indestructible, we're adaptable, we're flexible. We've proved in the last 4 centuries we have survived unspeakable torture, subjected to the most vicious domestic terrorism that America could put on us. We're able to live on nothing and with nothing. However, this is a problem because the survival mechanism is in the brain stem. We need to go back into our study guides and look at study guide number 18, Rising Above Emotion into the Thinking of God. And how does God think? He thinks mathematically. Now listen, the brain stem is beneath the intellect. When we function at that level, as the minister has in the study guide, that's the reptilian brain. That is where we do not think at all. We only act on primitive urge. We're no different than a snake, a rat, a spider. All we know is attract and repel. Everything we encounter either attracts us because it's a source of food or shelter, or it repels us because it's a threat to our life. So in the so-called ghettos in America, what we are witnessing, and the minister taught this at the Day of Atonement, we kill each other. You understand what I'm saying? Like animals, because we're functioning from the brainstem level. Now, why is that? That is not by accident, that is by design. We live in the shadows of the plantation to this day. We're thrown just enough food to get by, just enough shelter to cover us from nature. So as long as we feel insecure in any way in regard to basic needs, your survival mechanism is working. Now, as long as your survival mechanism is on green, your creative mechanism is shut down. You and I cannot create as long as we are struggling just to survive. And we will always struggle to survive when we have an every man for himself mentality. This is why the essence of the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is to do for self. Now, look at this. Let me prove this to you. If somebody comes and runs up and puts a pillow on your face, they knock you down and they put a pillow or some covering on your face and stop you from breathing, what are you going to do? You're going to fight with every ounce of energy in you to get air. You're not thinking about a poem. You're not writing your next book. You're trying to get air. This is the black community's condition right now. We are not in our look at what we do in survival mode. We haven't even seen what we could do in creative mode and would have no idea, we would have no idea what it is like were it not for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan among us today to show us how to act independently of the children of the slave master. See, we are so busy paying rent, keeping the lights on, keeping the heat on. We live on negative reinforcement. We tell our children, don't go to jail, don't get pregnant, don't become a drug dealer. That's negative reinforcement. The worst thing, beloved, about slavery was not the physical torture, as awful as it was. The worst thing is that we were robbed of the most basic human trait, which is to act in one's own self-interest. So sacred is this right that in criminal court you are not required to speak against yourself. The Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution gives you a right against self-incrimination. That's how unnatural it is to act on behalf of anyone else's interest above your own. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, do for self. Then Minister Farrakhan declares self-improvement is the basis for community development. He didn't say self-survival. Self-improvement. As a community, we are only as healthy as the individuals who make up the community. And so the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said separation is the best and only solution. Look at that. It's the best solution, all right? But even if it weren't the best solution, it's the only solution. Now, does that mean, dear guests, that we get in a rowboat and row our way over to Liberia? No, it is a process of joining on to our own kind. Hurry and join on to your own kind. In the process of doing that, you separate from that which is other than yourself. We're not going to make progress until we're able to predict the future. That's why you have to have a man among you and I, and we have him. He's a mercy. He has predictive power. You only get predictive power by controlling the future. You know what's going to happen if you mapping it out and doing it. He knew there would be a 1 million man march, October the 16th, 1995, not because he looked in some crystal ball, but because he called for it. So you and I must do the same thing each and every day. You got to deal with life on every point. Don't let anything that goes against your nature slide by without you responding to it. When we were in court fighting with those beasts, with the New York Post, and what had happened when that issue came out, Malcolm's widow says Farrakhan murdered Malcolm. It was Brother Ava Muhammad that pulled it off the press. And this was pre-internet. And we had a meeting at the National House with some of the staff, and it was decided that we need to go into New York and bring a lawsuit. We go into New York, we called the press, because this is serious, that type of slander, that libel, that type of defamation. Woe to the slanderers. So we go in and we called the press that Tuesday. We said, we're going to file a suit. They thought we were going to sue Mrs. Betty Shabazz. So they came out in droves to see black people attack and kill each other. And we were so fired up, we didn't have any money. The brothers were collecting money in the hall to pay the filing fee. And we sued the New York Post and Rupert Murdoch for $4.4 billion. Thank you. And when we stepped out of that courtroom and had that clerk's office, and that white press, you could see their faces fall. Why didn't you sue Mrs. Shabazz? For what? First of all, she didn't say what you said she said. And secondly, whatever she said, you published it, and then you added all of your distorted, filthy lies to it. Now, at the time, people made mockery of us for suing for so much money. You know, 4 billion, that's the distance of Pluto from the sun. Now, they made mockery of us, and we go in court, Brother Ara, Brother Larry, Sister Barbara, all of us, Brother Darius is speed reading, we got believers, everybody, we turned into our own law firm over at Kinko's. We're going up against the biggest firm in New York. But we had Allah and his messenger and Minister Farrakhan, so we had a good time doing this. We loved it. We loved it. But we go into court, and the judge, you know, the counselor, you can't seriously mean that you want $4.4 billion. What is this, symbolic? We said it's symbol and it's substance. It's a symbol and we want the money. Now, we didn't get the money, but we shut down that propaganda machine. They had printed part 1 of a 16-part series defaming our leader. And they had to stop after the first one. So I'm saying that to say, we gear up. He's back. He's been to death's door, and if we could only see it, if you look at him now, you see what the Christians call a miracle. You see it in your face. The strength of our foundation, as I start to close this down, beloved, the power of culture. And Minister Farrakhan said that culture is the outgrowth of the thinking of a people in a particular period in history. Now, the culture that has been assigned to us now is not our true culture. Now, out of culture, and this is going to show you why we have to separate and live among ourselves. See, out of culture, beloved, is where people develop knowledge of the human struggle based on their own collective memory, their own unique experience. For white people to tell our history is like the rapist describing the rape. You understand what I'm saying? History equips us for collective advancement. The youth are taught a history of the world within the language of their own culture. If you avail yourself of the study guides, I promise you that the glossary that Minister Farrakhan provided you, where he defines and redefines terms, I don't care what school you went to or didn't go to, you will become so effective maneuvering your way through society because it will absolutely upgrade your functional vocabulary to the highest degree. Why is that so important? Let's look at the scripture. In the Bible, in the book of Genesis, what did God use to create light? Words. He said, "Let there be light," and there was light. In the Holy Quran, it reads, when Allah desires a thing, he only says to it, "Be," and it is. So this tells us, beloved, contrary to what white corporate media is pushing on us, words are critical. Without a vocabulary of high-grade language, you don't have any inventory. No tools, beloved, to maneuver your way through society. Minister Farrakhan is revered by our people and many outside of our community because he has all three components that are necessary to breaking the shackles of mental bondage. Number one, and this is what we have to pass on to our children that he's giving us now. Number one, a superior knowledge of our true story, which we would never know if Master Ava Muhammad had not come to give it to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Our true story. Minister Farrakhan has mastered and has a superior knowledge of our story. Number two, he is possessed of a profound level of courage to tell it. It's one thing to know the truth. It's another thing to have the guts to tell the truth. This is what's holding us back as a people now. Negroes who are afraid to tell even minimal truth. They don't even want to say black in a conversation. Minister Farrakhan said we use virtue to cover a vice. We describe ourselves as humble. You know, I'm just humble. No, he said, you're a coward. You're just scared. And then third, he has the courage to act on what he just said. So beloved, without Master Farrakhan Muhammad coming and infusing supreme knowledge and wisdom into an immediate and direct descendant of slaves, one with the spiritual and genetic makeup to bring about the great escape, we would have been forever locked out of any way to build a bridge between self and self. Accept your own and be yourself. There's been an abyss between self, the higher self, and the intellectual self and the lower self. They have not been in one accord. We have been so damaged that if we were an automobile, they would say we were total. And yet, look at us now. We are not just a people that have to sit and say, look at what they did. Look at what they did. When we tell our history, don't just talk about what we did, but let's talk about who we would be, who we must be, that we successfully were able to overcome it. We have defeated the undefeatable. We have surmounted the insurmountable. So when your child, you tell your children, when they come up with some little sissy math test, you got to say, bring it. Bring it. We should run away and have an inferiority complex about nothing just based on our history. Now look. This is the ground bed right here as I close for the values and social organization that tie a people together. That is what is occurring with the Nation of Islam. The teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad are indispensable to our freedom, indispensable to our ability to be just toward one another, indispensable to our ability to be our true selves. America has not only denied us our identity, but she has denied us the right to act in our own self-interest. You know, I'm a pretty quick student. It only took me 25 years to realize that the minister is completely unwilling to leave any of us. He is unwilling to leave a single one of us in the hands of the children of our slave master. And his unwillingness to leave any of us has been a trial for all of us. You understand? It only took me 25 years. Just saw it this morning after prayer. He is the embodiment of mercy. He is that. I happened to be on a little radio show recently, and I'm on this show in my little hometown, Columbus, Ohio, and we're just having the nicest conversation about restoring our community. We're trying to get back in Columbus what was taken from us. And again, see, look at how the minister in every aspect of his life teaches us how to do things. You lose something, go get it back. Don't sit and say, oh, we lost it. We got Mas Mariam back when it all was lost. You understand? Now look, I'm on this little radio show. We're just, and we're going to restore the community and Mount Vernon Avenue, and Sister Donna, you know Columbus, and that used to be the avenue for all the black glitterati in the 30s and 40s, and everybody from Count Basie to Duke Ellington and Billie Holiday. So now they are moving in, white folks. But anyway, we're just talking, and a call came in. They said, well, we have a caller on the line. And I'm sitting there, and this caller comes on the line and begins railing against the minister and attacking the Million Man March. Now, there were several people in the studio, including my high school principal. Well, as this man starts going on and slandering the minister, you know, the minister said we have up to 12 cells within us. Well, you know, that brought the dragon up. And my head started spinning around. It was like one cell said, you know, it's like the room went into a cloud. I started hyperventilating. And your one self was saying, is he talking about the minister? Get Brother Darius, we're going to his house, we're going to crush his windpipe. Then another self said, no, just hold on, hold on. All praises to Allah for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan. Oh my God. So all the cells is arguing, and you know, I said, now I know I can take him out. I'm going to take him out. There's no question about that. But the question, and I'm saying this for us too, we have to grow. We have to grow. You know, as I grow, I realize, as the minister said, we have to develop finesse and polish and, you know, elevating our language. So maybe 10 years ago, I would have come another way, and I never would have been invited back again. I would have killed that caller, you know, because you know you're going to do mind alteration on the caller, but then you got to think about all the other people who are listening. And so I didn't even address the caller. I talked to the host. I said, this is an example of the extent of damage that has been done to us as a people. The minister didn't follow up on the 1 Million Man March. Follow up with what? What are you talking about? He's the leader. He led us there. We need to follow up. You know how many adoptions? You know how many adoptions took place? You know how many black men got married? You know how many black men apologized and set it right with their woman? You cannot calculate the benefit of that. But this is the extent of our mental illness. That caller was proof that we are owed reparations. And that's what I think I said that day. But I'm saying that to say, don't look to the minister to do everything. The Holy Quran said the sun moves on to its destination. When the sun is out in the sky, get up and go out there and get some of the light. You understand what we're saying here? We live in a time of major upheaval, a time of universal change, a time of complete change, a time that comes into season only once every 50,000 years. In order to produce and maintain a family in accordance with the will of Allah in this time, we have got to act in our own self-interest. Whenever, wherever you see Minister Farrakhan, understand he is the quintessence of our own self-interest. When they were collecting charity at Mosque number 7 in 1972 on that Sunday, people were given $1,000. Before the minister finished asking, and they weren't raising money to go to a party, they were raising bail money to get the FOI out of jail. You understand what I'm saying? And before the minister could get it out, a sister jumped up and said, I give $1,000. And a brother jumped up and said, well, if she's giving one, I'm going to give two. And they raised $8,000 in about 5 minutes.
35 years ago. And I want you to place that in context of what is being asked of us today, which is absolutely nothing. It's only a symbol. So, beloved, the ideas in the mind of God are both masculine and feminine. Every divine attribute of Allah has a masculine and feminine manifestation, and that harmonious blending of male-female energy is essential to all life. You want to know something? You want to learn something? Have some wisdom to take with you? Look at Study Guide 19A. And the study group is open to all of the community, not just the registered believers. Let me tell you what Minister Farrakhan will give you in Study Guide 19A. And don't tell me you can't go out in the world and deal with people with this. He teaches of the history of the Bible, the Holy Quran, the 25,000-year cycle. He teaches the transmission of the wisdom of God through human beings, the great trial, the mishandling of knowledge, and the 66 trillion year fast and feast at its end, how and why the knowledge of God became a secret, the self-creation of the originator, the law of life and death, and how the Creator escaped his own law. He identifies the most mysterious force in the universe. He explains the difference between the brain of God and the mind of God. He describes the origin of thought and the thought that gave rise to the brain. He asked and answered the question, why is Jesus called the Son of God? He explains the name Adam. He teaches the infinite power of the mind of the Creator, and he explains why the universe itself cannot contain the mind of the Creator forever. He explains why we do not bow or make physical images of worship. The awesome declaration of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that God is a man. He explains the meaning of Messiah and Mahdi. He explains the meaning of everlasting life. He explains the making of devil and why and how the devil was made. He teaches of the secret of God in the woman, the relationship between Revelations 12 and Surah 19, the pivotal role of the woman in closing one world and bringing in another, the meaning of the words virgin shall conceive. He teaches of the birth of Master Farrakhan Muhammad and proves who he is, proves who the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is, and tells us of his mission as a witness bearer of the Messiah. Do you think that study guide might be of interest to you? There's no precise record of when the wave of migrants began in earnest, because we had been escaping the South, as you know, since we got here and there. But black historians and scholars place it sometime during World War I. The North had a labor shortage, and there was an abundance of workers, black people in the South, trying to escape the hellhole that was the South. I haven't even talked about our inability to get work. And if you did work, it was identical to slavery. As a sharecropper, they sounded the horn before the sun came up, and you better be out in that field. But one of the earliest recorded events was February 5th, 1916. And it was recorded and spoken of in the Chicago Defender. The Chicago Defender found itself, as time passed, cast into the role of agitator, as well as record keeper of the movement. But on February 5th, 1916, having whispered and planned for months, several hundred black families quietly slipped out of Selma, Alabama. Oh yeah, now if you decide, I want to go to New York, I want to live in Los Angeles, your only consideration, you got to consider finances, what your plans are, your goals, family, etc. Outside of that, if you want to go, you go.
You fly, you take a train, you drive, you get a ride. You didn't leave the South like that. You sneaked out of there. If that peckerwood caught you trying to leave, you're a dead man, you're a dead woman. And so families, for the most part, left in pieces. Oftentimes the men would go first and then come back and get the woman, and sometimes they didn't come back. Families broke up. Some stayed together, but a lot of families broke up in the trauma of trying to get out. So you had to slip out of there in 1915, 1930, even the 1940s, like we did in the days of Harriet Tubman. Now, this was a leaderless movement. There was no Moses, no Joshua, no Dr. King. This movement had to be guided by God Himself, because the one man He would ultimately raise up to lead us to freedom, the spiritual leader, the man that would speak for us, to us, and represent us to our enemy and bring us directly from God, a life-giving, life-saving body of knowledge. He was among the 6 million. In Cordell County, Georgia, October 7th, 1897, in a place called Sandersville, a petite but very intense woman named Marie. And brother, I'm so sorry I forgot the number on the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's mother's photo. If we could bring that up. This is a later photo of her. Just a stunningly beautiful woman. But she gave birth that day. All praises due to Allah. Thank you. She gave birth to the 7th of her 13 children. Her husband, William, if we could bring his picture up. Her husband, William, was a sharecropper and a Baptist minister. The father of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. All praise is due to Allah for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, for his mother and father. It has been said by family members that she, while pregnant, saw a light in the window of her bedroom, and she heard a voice telling her her unborn son would be a messenger of God. She was frightened by that experience and went to her father, Rufus, the grandfather of this baby, the next day out at the barn, and he said to her, "Name the child Elijah." Young Elijah taught himself to read from the Bible. He never went beyond the 4th grade level in Georgia's rural school system. And at 19, he was working as a plowboy. At 21, he eloped with 18-year-old Clara Clarendon. Now, why did they elope? Well, her father owned a little bit of land, and he was opposed to his daughter's marriage to a sharecropper's son. But after they married, this young man, Elijah, and the family name was Poole, he went to her father and promised him he would give her a good life. And yeah, that was an understatement. In 1923, Elijah Poole joined the great exodus from the South. His father, William, his older brother, Sam, and he went to Detroit seeking work in the blooming auto industry. His father, William, later said it was urgent for him to get his sons out of the South. So these three men, William and his two sons, Sam and Elijah, as I told you earlier, families often sent an advance party to the North. Once they secured employment at the Chevrolet plant, they sent for their wives and children. The stock market crash and the Great Depression left that family very impoverished in the early 1930s. And one day, some ladies who knew Clara Poole brought a man to the house. This man was known as a peddler of silk fabric. Included in his inventory was this lovely red cloth that the sisters were starting to put in their windows. The man asked Clara, Mother Clara, we know her as now, he said, "Where is brother?" Referring to the husband. She said, "He's in the house," and he told her, "Both of you are invited to a meeting on Sunday." That man we now know as Master Ava Muhammad, and he gave a lecture that would change not only Elijah's life, but our lives forever. Now, brothers and sisters, and I don't plan to be long, and it's as though Brother Dr. Wesley and I are on the same page. He talked about a perfect storm. There's a perfect storm that has come together, and at the center of it is the man born to lead us in our final push to freedom. I want to share with you this evening, and I did promise I was going to be brief, so I just want to take about 10 more minutes and share with you something from a course of study that Minister Farrakhan gave called Self-Improvement, the basis for community development. And he has given us 17 units of study. All of these units are based on self-examination, self-analysis, and self-correction. Because nobody knows or has the capacity to know you better than you know yourself. Okay? God has put some of his essence in every last one of us. You have a set of fingerprints that nobody else has. You have a voice print that no one else possesses. So this means, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, there's nothing on the outside that does not come from within. If you possess unique fingerprints, unique voice prints, you know what else we possess? A unique set of spiritual attributes from God himself that nobody else, living or dead, ever possessed except you. I'm speaking of the individual you now. I don't care who you are. I don't care what problems you are beset with. You have within you something that is so awesome that once you come in touch with it and manifest it, nobody else on this earth will be able to equal you in that skill or gift. And as long as we sit dormant on that skill or gift, we are actually denying the black nation its liberation. This is one of the terrible, terrible legacies of inferiority. See, we're all narrowed down to 2 or 3 positions that all of us vie for. White people say, well, you can either be an entertainer, an athlete, a politician. And that's about the extent of it. And nothing else is offered to us. So we all go after the same little councilman seat, or we all try to get on the same
team in the NBA. When you have, and it's really sad because original people are so intensely gifted that it almost becomes a joke. When you try to go among us, for example, to find a singer, we have so many gifted voices that we can search the earth and we can make one or two. We can find Anita Baker, find this one and that one, but we'll never exhaust our resources. So you have all these young women in the ghetto, and here's a young sister growing up, and she's told, "Girl, you can sing, so you need to try to go get a record contract." Well, the fact that she has an awesome singing voice does not negate the fact she might be a physicist. She might be a chemist. She might be an architect. Here's her brother. Well, you can really run, man. So you need to try for the Olympics. Well, that's all well and good. But don't you know that his capability in the physical realm is nothing but a manifestation of what his capability is in the intellectual and spiritual realm? Form follows function. They say that we are physically superior and they're mentally superior. But you are physically superior because you're intellectually superior.
That's right.
You are given the capability to act out what your brain dictates that your flesh should do.
That's right.
But because we are given this little narrow list of things that we can be in life, and our children are left looking at television and extracting from the TV set what their goal or career should be, and this is why we can't build a nation. You can't have a nation without land and someone to farm the land. But we've been made adverse to that. We think of farming as picking cotton.
That's true.
And our children think that bread comes from the local grocery store. But as long as we are rendered tenants in rent from a landlord, we'll never have a nation. But we must begin to offer our children a broader alternative. Now, how does that happen? What is it that brings that about? It comes from the study of self. And this is what I want to share with you very briefly. In the Holy Quran, we are told that Allah has 99 attributes, or traits, or qualities. And each one of us in this room, brothers and sisters, has one or more of those attributes. And not only do you have it, but you have the capacity to develop that trait to its perfected state. Now you can say, well, tell me what mine is so I can go on out and make money. And you know what? In truth, you can make money from your quality. See, now, we're not doing justice by ourselves if we say that life is about spiritual development without some kind of material fruit. You know, if you're supposed to be tight with God, close to God, then you should show something of that. Am I right? That's right. See, we were taught that if you're religious and righteous, you should take a poverty vow. But that's something that a deceiver put over on you. That's right. See, because after you leave this earth, even if there is another life, it's not like this one. And if you sit around and waste this one wallowing in the ghetto, why should God give you something better than the next one anyway? So you need to get all you can get today. And not lay around waiting for some buying buy. Go on and get what you can, while you can, on this point. And that will justify, if there is such a thing as another life, it'll justify you being allowed into that life. But work with what God has given us on this point. Now, some of the attributes of Allah are beneficence, mercy, He loves, He's the wise, He's the all-knowing. Tell you something else, brothers. One of his traits is He is the destroyer. He's the killer. See, you might have some little young 5-year-old boy in your house that's running around destroying your home. And the white counselor's telling you he's hyperactive. And he needs medication. But what it is he possesses that attribute of God to destroy. And some things on this planet need to be removed. And you might have produced the very child that was born to remove that which needs to be removed. So with a little bit, but see, don't try to rob him of what he has and turn him into a little faggot, but give him some direction in what he needs. Some of you are very patient. Patience is an attribute of the Creator. The Creator is an attribute. All right? Some of you have that. You have it to the point where once you stand up and show it to the world, you will stun us into speechlessness the day you manifest it. But nobody can bring that out of you except you and your God. The best anybody can do is talk to you about it and stimulate an interest in you in it. But there are people sitting in this room today that have such an in-depth, precise, scientific mind that if you were put in the proper environment and given the latitude and the wherewithal to work with, you can find an answer to sickle cell anemia and find an answer to the things that plague us and shorten our lives. The Holy Quran says in the 96th surah, which is the first revelation to Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah of Arabia, peace be upon him. It says, read in the name of thy Lord who creates man from a clot. Read in thy Lord is most generous, who taught man by pen what man knew not. Two lost arts, reading and writing. To read means to discover. But there was a time in this country when to read meant what for us? Data. So in order to survive, we developed an aversion to reading. To the point now where we will not read. This is why Brother made reference to us earlier. We carry books around. We carry a lot of books, but we really don't read. We skim. We read the first page. Have you read Black Man's Guide to Understanding the Black Woman? Half of the people out in the hallways yelling and screaming about it haven't even read it. But see, what it was is you heard what somebody else said they read. And that's what we do. We walk around and we pick up fragments of hearsay. The person we picked it up from got it as a fragment in the verses. And then we walk around and quote it, or we read the introduction to the chapter. Yeah, I read the Holy Quran, I'm waiting for the movie. Not knowing that that book is as deep as the God that revealed it. Everybody in this room can sit down and read the Holy Quran and come up with an insight that nobody else in the room saw. That's the whole purpose he revealed it. After the proper name of Allah, you heard when I said there, read the name of thy Lord. Lord, create. Oh, by the way, writing. Out of reading comes writing. How many of you can remember the last time you wrote a letter? Just to communicate. Just to say, this is what I did today. How many have done that? Don't you get an incredible sense of satisfaction from doing that? You know, that is a lost art to us. And do you know that the reason we have lost the ability to speak to one another properly is because we don't read and write? You see, writing hones down verbal skills. Because writing is a record.
of what you said. You can't write in a letter and I went downtown and and like because when you look back at the pages, it's horrible. Right. You have to sit and look at it. But this is how we talk to each other. We have somewhere in the realm of 600 words in our vocabulary, the average person. In America, I'm not talking just about black people either. White people are also functionally illiterate. The new kids on the block have made up a word, positivity. And to cover for the manifest ignorance that displayed, the Caucasians said, oh, that's so cute, they made up a new word. But what it is, they're just ignorant. The United States is 26, America is 26th illiteracy in the world. But see, we talk about nation building, but we can't even talk to each other. Yeah, I went down to the MF store and got me an MF loaf of bread, and this MF waited on me, and I went back to my MF woman, But we say we're melanin man. I'm the African American. I'm the black man. I'm the maker, the owner, the cream of the planet Earth, the God of the universe. How can you exercise rule and dominion if you have no vocabulary to call anything into existence? I'd like to see coming to me. You know what whatchamacallits. You know, and this is how we talk to this. You know what I meant. Isn't that why we end up in arguments? Because we don't speak to please. That's right. You're sitting at home with your fish. Hey, bring me one of them. Huh? I said, bring me. You know what I want. The same thing I wanted yesterday at this time. Why don't you just say what you want? I can't read your mind. I can't read a magazine. How can I read your mind? And then, because we can't talk, because language is the only difference between man and animal. A lot of animals got two legs. You can't say it's because we walk on two legs. A whole lot of creatures in the animal world. Pelicans got two legs. So it's not that. It's not that we have eyes and ears and a mouth. But the only difference between us and a zebra or gorilla or anything else is language. And when you can't talk and you can't express yourself, you begin to act like a dog and a cat.
That's right.
And we start calling each other fox and wolf and dog. Because there's no difference. What's the difference between us and a bear? He gets up in the morning. Well, a little difference because he has more control over his schedule. Because see, at least the bear does get up and go out and bear. See, we lay in the bed, we're the ruler, the original man, the primogenitor of the human family. We wake up at noon. The sun has been out. The sun that our fathers willed into existence. Been out shining. The birds are up. The bees are up.
That's true.
The ants are up. The flowers have even come out. It's high noon, and the sun we made wakes us up. Phone rings. Yeah, we don't know how to answer a telephone. What's happening, man? What you gonna do? I don't know what you gonna do. Did you take care of that? No, I wasn't able to get that. This is how everything is this or that. And because we cannot express ourselves, we get frustrated because the human being needs to express. And that is a key part to the black man's ability to govern. This is why Mr. Farrakhan is a happy man. Because he can tell the white man in 1,000 words or more without breathing or missing a beat exactly who and what. And he feels good at it.
Right. Go ahead.
He don't need a gun, he just blow him away. He shot him in the head. But why can't we all do that? If one black man He said Hitler was, did you hear that? He said Hitler was a great man. When they're the ones that put Hitler's face on Time magazine, we did. They're the ones that have him on Discovery Channel and public access TV every other day. Why? The Jews are reminding one another of the Holocaust.
That's true.
But how often do we go on television and put on that television a narrative or a documentary demonstrating what was done to us? No, we get enough money to make a movie. We make Harlem Nights.
Come on.
Where black men and women fight each other, punch each other in the stomach, shoot each other's toes off.
Yeah.
Two young black females in the movie, beautiful women, they're both paired off with big, fat, nasty white men.
Yep.
See, something's wrong with us. But getting back to this language, because of the lack of it, we get frustrated. You know what happens? When you can't express yourself through words, you go in your coat. See, you know, I see, oh, bang, bang, bang. Right. Now you understand what you know what I'm saying? You just shit. Hold it. Yeah. And we're just blowing each other away. See? But all that comes from disobeying God. God said, breathe in my name. Now, after the proper name Allah, do you know that the greatest prominence given to any attribute is this? In Arabic, it's called Ra. And in English, it means Lord. It is mentioned 960 times in the Holy Quran. And why? Because Lord or Ra signifies a God. This is our God. And I'll just go home on this point because you can go home tonight and relax on this. I don't care if you got an eviction notice in your mailbox. Probably most of us have gotten something, if not that, similar to that. You know, a disconnect notice. There's always some cloud over it. You ever notice that? Some probation officer we have to see. Some methadone clinic we have to visit. We've got to go see some judge about child support. What we need, we got to worry about, should I have the baby, shouldn't I have the baby? See, forget about all that. Just for a second. I don't care if you just got told today you have terminal cancer, which I was told that in 1979.
Come on with it.
And it was real at the time. But that was the white man's reality.
All right.
See, somebody came to me with another reality.
All right.
So it made my mind change. And when my mind changed, my mind gave my body a new set of We have a brother in Chicago always says, ain't nothing spooky about it. It's not. Ain't nothing spooky here. Meaning that we're not talking about some Negro heaven and green patches on some wings. We're talking about life while you live.
That's right.
But you have a Lord. You have a God who's not going to stand by and watch you hang off a tree. He is the Lord, Ra. Lord who brings all that is in this universe to a state of perfection through various stages of growth. Beginning with, are you ready for this? Where we came from, what? Nothingness. You think you have a problem, right? Because you don't have the rent money. Or you're about to get fired from this little cheap job. But check it out. The biggest problem you had was when you were one of 200 million sperm. Everybody's moving out. There is only one position open. 200 million applicants. And we're off. Number one, we're swimming uphill against the law of gravity. Number two, we're coming through acid rain. running into each other, eating each other alive. All the way up to. But you know what? One of them got through. And the one that got through is sitting in the seat today. And you will never meet in life any odds against you that will be greater than that. And if you came through that and came out not honorable mention, not top 10, but you came through that bad fella as numero uno. The winner takes all. And you came into existence, and who was with you? Mother? No. Mother probably didn't even know what was happening. Until about a month later after breakfast. Oh, God. Okay. And poor father. He may not know it is. But I tell you who did know. Allah knew. He was feeding you off your mother and my mother before she even knew she was pregnant. Isn't that so? Ra, the author of all existence. So doesn't that make a diagnosis of cancer seem a little cheap? For something for you to get scared of? And don't you know once that sperm and ovum hooked up and those life cells formed, and once you had a brain, do you know where the rest of you came from after Allah got your brain together? You did. You called your own self. Your brain caused your organs and limbs to come into being. And Allah says anything He can do once, He can do it again. This is why the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us through Minister Farrakhan, look, you can get an arm cut off. And you can call it back. What's the big deal? It's just some vibrations. You came, we were nothing, is what I'm saying. We came here out of nothing. So there's nothing that we're dealing with that we can't overcome if we would only submit. Wrong. 2 senses, this great attribute. Number 1, He fosters and nourishes. And secondly, He regulates, completes, and accomplishes. So don't think that this great and awesome being, God, who brought you here, just brought you here and dumped you. He's still with us. And He placed some of His essence within each of us. So there is no such thing as a life form that He is not capable of fostering in such a manner as to make it attain one condition after another until it reaches its goal of perfection. And I close with these words from the Holy Quran, from the 87th chapter. Glorify the name of thy Lord, the Most High, who creates, then makes complete, and who measures, then guides. We have what we need, beloved, to build a nation. We have brilliance, we have skills, we have artistic capability. But if each one of us, and I say again, I'm talking to myself because I'm far from this, I'm just reading this. But if we would just go home and start looking within, forget about what John's got and Joe's got and Susie's got. Don't desire what they've got. Be a parasite. Bring up an image up from within your soul what your destiny is. Don't get all upset because Susie's on the stage or Joe is getting an applause. Because your day is just around the corner. But the only way you're going to be ready, see, the problem is people live and die and their day does come, but they're not prepared to meet it on that occasion. So when you go home tonight, you pray to Him in whatever form pleases you. You communicate with Him. You don't need a prayer cloth or a cross or a piece of something that somebody mailed. All you have to do is talk to him. You don't have to talk to him in a particular language. You don't have to have an accent. Just talk to him. He knows all about you. And ask him tonight, who am I? And just, what is it that you have deposited in me that I need to bring out for the benefit of myself, my community, and my nation? Build up the human potential in yourself, and I'll do the same, and we will be on the road to building a nation.
That's good.
May Allah bless us all with the light of understanding. Assalamu alaikum.